Okay, let's dive into this explainer immediately, dropping you right into the morning the unimaginable headline breaks. Texas has decided to secede from the Union. The entire world just stops, stares at their screens, and goes, wait, is this actually real? Because if the state that built its entire identity on independence, power, and, well, sheer attitude actually walked away, the consequences wouldn't just shake America. They would literally rattle the entire planet.
And look, the very first reaction to this historic move, it absolutely wouldn't be some calm, measured political discussion. We're talking sheer, unadulterated chaos across news networks and capitals around the world. Texas isn't just another state, right? It's a total giant in terms of land, population, energy, and military presence. Politicians would be shouting, lawyers would be wielding the Constitution like a weapon. And suddenly, we're not just looking at one state leaving. We're faced with a much deeper question. What actually holds the United States together in the first place?
Now, what's really interesting here is how fast the economic shockwaves hit. Investors, they are definitely not waiting around for politicians to finish their speeches. The very first shockwave is purely financial. I mean, think about your own bank account or retirement savings for a second. Because Texas is so deeply wired into U.S. banking networks, the reaction is instantaneous. Investors pull their money out immediately. The stock market takes a nosedive, and the U.S. dollar faces massive instability. Entire global industries would scramble in a panic, freezing expansion plans, and trying to figure out how to handle a brand new international border dropping right into the middle of North America.
Neutrally looking at the standoff, this brilliantly illustrates the immediate constitutional clash we'd see. On one side, Washington is going to insist that the Union is irreversible, declaring a constitutional emergency and stating that unilateral secession is just flat out impossible. But on the flip side, Texas leadership argues the exact opposite. They assert their sovereign right to self-determination, claiming they have the right to control their own future and legally reject Washington's authority. Every single legal move made in this phase carries weight that is honestly hard to even comprehend.
Let's move on to Section 1, a new border, the bureaucratic nightmare.
So seeing how this builds from a political theory into an absolute logistical nightmare for everyday people and businesses is wild. Sure, the idea of leaving sounds dramatic on paper, but on the ground, seamless highways instantly become international crossings. Just imagine needing a passport to drive a delivery truck into Oklahoma, or hitting a newly established customs checkpoint just to visit your folks' estate over. These new immigration controls would immediately snarl the delivery of food, fuel, and medical goods. Ports and airports would be thrown into a dense legal maze, and regular families would face massive, terrifying uncertainty every single day.
And then there's the power grid. So the crucial point regarding energy is that losing Texas, which is a massive powerhouse in oil, gas, refining, and electricity, threatens the very fuel that keeps modern society alive. Would Texas stay connected to its neighbors' grids? Would the rest of America have to treat Texas energy as a foreign supply? These aren't just wonky technical issues. They are absolute survival questions. Because electricity and industrial power are, quite literally, the bloodstream of civilization.
Okay, moving right along to Section 2, the legal and military standoff.
Beyond the economy, the transition would ignite a brutal, highly complex war in the courts. The justice system would be absolutely flooded with endless lawsuits trying to untangle decades of integrated federal assets. I mean, what happens to federal lands and national parks? Who takes on the national debt or keeps the taxes that were already collected? What happens to Social Security, pensions, and veterans benefits? And maybe the most complicated puzzle of all, what is the actual citizenship status of Americans who are born in Texas? The ensuing legal struggle over sovereignty would be long, messy, and incredibly expensive.
And we absolutely cannot ignore the military implications here, which create a dangerously tense reality. Texas hosts some incredibly strategic military installations. The federal government would almost certainly view the separation of these bases, ports, and border infrastructure as a direct, unacceptable challenge to national authority. While this doesn't automatically mean active war breaks out, it guarantees extreme caution, highly tense troop deployments, and frightening standoffs. The shadow of a civil war would hover over every single conversation. It's that terrifying possibility that nobody really wants to say out loud.
Then there's the domino effect. If one giant state successfully leaves, partisan tensions would absolutely spike nationwide. Citizens across the remaining 49 states would start furiously debating, is the United States a permanent nation-state with irreversible borders, or is it just a voluntary alliance? Folks who distrust Washington might start asking if their state could demand independence next. Meanwhile, those defending national unity would desperately fear everything unraveling. Because, if Texas can go, what's stopping the whole thing from falling apart?
Internationally, global leaders would be watching all of this unfold with extreme nervousness. Global separatists would take immediate notice, And sure, some governments might even quietly support the move if it weakened the US and benefited their own geopolitical interests. But honestly, a lot of others would proceed with sheer terror at the precedent it sets. Because if a powerful state like Texas can leave a global superpower like the United States, the entire concept of permanent national borders is completely shattered everywhere.
Next up is Section 3, the psychological reality.
Moving past all the legalities, we have to examine the massive emotional toll this would take on identity. Inside Texas, the psychological extremes would clash violently, literally right in the same neighborhoods. On one hand, you'd have citizens celebrating in the streets, waving flags of liberation, feeling like they've finally reclaimed their ultimate destiny. But right next door, you'd have people absolutely terrified about their jobs, their healthcare, and their life savings. Political speeches about independence sound amazing, but the reality is that a brand new government suddenly has to pay the bills, keep the lights on, run the hospitals, and manage crisis after crisis.
And for the remaining 49 states, the laws would fundamentally alter the very geometry of America. The balance of power in Congress would shift overnight, forcing a complete rewrite of electoral maps, trade routes, and national identity. As the quote suggests, America without Texas would feel like a giant missing a limb. The map in our heads might still show 50 states, but the reality would leave a void so massive that the country would have to completely rethink its entire place in the world.
Now let's zoom out for a second and ask, could Texas actually survive on its own? Well, yes. It possesses immense talent, massive industry, world-class universities, and huge global business connections. But here's the catch. Survival is not the same thing as thriving. Building a durable, thriving country out of a moment of passion takes decades of painstaking, delicate diplomacy with the US, Mexico, and the rest of the world. It requires navigating around isolation and economic instability. Honestly, leaving is the easy part to imagine. Actually governing and creating lasting stability, that is the truly hard part.
We'll leave you with this final, provocative thought to consider. The cameras are rolling, the flags have changed, and the whole world is watching. In that unforgettable moment, Texas is no longer just a state. It becomes a question the entire planet must answer. Can a giant walk away from the country that made it and still remain strong enough to stand on its own? It's a scenario that keeps historians awake at night and economists totally nervous. Because if this event ever actually happened, it would permanently redefine the world order.